were the enslaved. You know, and it's interesting. A 15-year-old girl called me on that. I was talking about my slave ancestors. She said, "Excuse me? Your ancestors were not slaves. They were enslaved." Huge difference.
The organization is the St. Louis African American History and Genealogy Society, and we were started about 8.5 years ago.
What we do in the organization, we come together, we bring in speakers to talk about African American history. We share stories about our ancestors.
In the early stages, we thought we would just do genealogy, and then we realized that being African Americans, that would be a unique experience because of our heritage. We need to know something about our past before we can start to dig into that genealogy. And we came to the conclusion that those words could almost be interchangeable, as you cannot understand your genealogy without understanding the history of African people, people of African descent.
What got me into genealogy research is I've always had a curiosity, even when I was young. And that curiosity was, I would say, fertilized by my paternal grandmother, the late Willie Ely Collier. And she and I were very close. I was very close to both of my paternal grandmother and paternal grandfather, and I would go fishing with them. And my grandmother would just tell me a lot about her history, her family history, her mother, her father, her grandfather, and I just used to always find that fascinating, the ancestors before us. That just always be fascinating to learn about them, and I knew that I was from these people.
I started having an interest in my family when I was in high school. I would go visit my great aunts, my maternal grandmother, and I would ask them different questions about different family members, their parents, and what did they do growing up. And at that time, Ancestry.com wasn't around, so I would go to the library and pull the census records from the Soundex, from the microfilm. And as I would find records, I became more and more interested in our family because it's exciting.
What I've learned about my history as far as genealogy is pretty much what my mother has researched. She pretty much has been doing this for a long time, so there wasn't really much work for me to do when it came to looking at stuff. As far as just studying the history of African Americans and people who I may identify with culturally, I learned more things outside of school. What sparked me learning about it is when I took a world history class in high school, and the way he taught world history is pretty much world history from the European perspective. And so there were times where we would probably correct him and say, well, we didn't learn about this, or that's really not true, that's just from one perspective, and he would tell us that we were wrong. And so that really sparked me to just get more into, learning world history through different perspectives.
When young people, even when older people learn who they really are as people of African descent, they will walk with a different pride. Understanding the genealogy and history of African people does not detract one from understanding that if I want to be an engineer, an architect, a musician, a mathematician, a scientist, whatever it is I want to be, I can do that, and I can understand who I am as well.
The way slavery still affects us today is the fact that it's still implemented in our systems, certain inequalities, and also that it's not really portrayed right in our textbook. So back then, we weren't really included in history to begin with. Everything that we learned, even if we could learn, we weren't included. It was kind of like we poofed into thin air when the transatlantic slave trade happened. It's kind of like we were created by white society.
What's important to understand about our history and why it's important, especially for African Americans today, is because not enough of our history is being told. We're left out of the textbooks. What's written in the textbooks is not necessarily true, or there's a lot of inaccuracies there. You look at our youth today, doesn't even know where they came from. They don't know how to identify themselves. Some of them are coming up in single parent homes. They may know who mom is, but they may not know who dad is.
You learn, of yourself. So when you do genealogy research, it's actually a study of oneself, because you're learning who you are as a person, where you come from. And psychologically, that is very important for not just only young people, for everybody. Because a lot of people don't know who they are, don't know where they come from.
We have to be curious, and we have to even the family stories. Many times the so-called experts will say that you cannot rely on oral history. African Americans have proved that to be wrong time and time and time again. That there is usually a kernel of truth in those family stories. So we don't dismiss them. We take them and put all those other things together that the family is talking about.
If we learn from those before us, if we talk to our family more, if we just sit down and do some research, just be curious, then we can go really far with that. We'll know more about ourselves.
It's very important that we preserve our history as African Americans. Our ancestors are counting on us to tell their story, to keep them alive. The fact that I'm sitting here is representative of the perseverance they went to make it possible for me to be here. I'm on a mission to tell their story. It's very important. Their lives matter to me.